So today we're talking about how to analyze crease patterns to determine the method of folding that you're going to use. And this is particularly useful if you're using patterns with trapezoids. And there's a bunch of other patterns that I didn't get out to show you that you can use this on. But the main focus for today is folding in stripes and how to recognize that you should. The short version is when you have patterns that have trapezoids or rhombuses and triangles without any hexagons, those are good patterns to fold in stripes. And they're typically not good patterns to fold in rings around the center. So let's take a look at this particular one, and we're going to analyze it and see what the underlying structure is so we can see how to fold. So this underlying structure is called a tiling. It's basically a map of how the pleats are moving through the pattern and how the twists are connected. Specifically, how different twist shapes are connected. And I'm starting with a completely blank file. It has other stuff to the side, but I'm starting from scratch to show you how you can do this analysis for any pattern, whether you have template files for it or not. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a hexagon. And well, actually, sorry. The first thing I'm going to do is look at my crease pattern and notice, is this on triangle grid or square grid? This one is on a triangle grid. And what shapes are we twisting? We have this shape that's outlined, that's a trapezoid, and this shape that's outlined, that's a triangle. And we have another trapezoid down here that's different from this trapezoid. They're mirrored copies of each other. And we have these two different orientations of triangles. And looking around, I can't see anything else in this pattern other than those two orientations of trapezoid and two orientations of triangle. We've got this C with those 4 twists that's repeating everywhere, and we have layers of these twists. So that's what's going on here. And how do we represent that so we can see better like what's going on? How do we make a simplified version? That's what the tiling is, a simplified version of what we're looking at. And so I'm going to start by drawing a hexagon, and then I'm going to draw a trapezoid using the corners of that hexagon. And I'm going to fill it in with white, just so it's easier to grab. And I'm also going to use that hexagon. So the hexagon is kind of the base shape for all of my triangle grid twists. I'm going to use that hexagon to draw myself a triangle. And I'm also going to fill that in white so it's easier to grab and move around. So since we saw the only shapes that we have here are trapezoids and triangles, I can get rid of that kind of helper piece and start arranging these trapezoids and triangles in the same way they are in the crease pattern. And that's not to say the same as the outline. It's that the edges of these tiles are matching up with the directions the pleats are going. So for this trapezoid, the double depth pleat, so there's an invisible mountain that's connecting the tips of these two, just like there's an invisible mountain here and here. That mountain is 2 spaces away from the valley. So that pleat is, the double depth pleat is heading down out of the trapezoid, so the long edge of the trapezoid needs to be down. And likewise, on the receiving end, that next trapezoid has its double depth pleat going up. So I can copy that trapezoid down below. And then I can say, okay, on our first trapezoid, I've got a pleat going up and to the left into a triangle, up and to the left into a triangle. On the one down below, I'm going down and to the left into a triangle. So I can copy that. And that is my 4 twists. I could at this point say, okay, this one and that one are the right-handed ones and color them red. I could leave them all white. It's not really going to matter. The benefit of coloring them red is that you can do a sanity check and say like, okay, did I get the pattern right? If I did, then I'll be alternating red, white across each edge. And how is this going to repeat? Well, the pleat going down out of the bottom of those two trapezoids is connecting to the pleat going up from the copy of the first one. So I can duplicate this and say those 2 trapezoids are directly connected. And I'm going to go ahead and make another couple copies so we can see more what's going on. And then with these, I can say the pleat going up and right from our first trapezoid is connecting to a copy of the same triangle as the pleat going up and left. So the pleat going this way is connected to a copy of the pleat going that way. And I can take and copy this over. So we've analyzed our crease pattern to find our tiling. And now we need to decide how to fold it. What I'm looking for in how to fold it is where are the lines that go all the way through. These are lines such that all the pleats that cross them are going the same direction. And so if we stop folding at those lines, we will not have pleat overlaps. All those pleats will be heading out in the same direction. And so the easiest way to fold is going to be one of these layers at a time, and then add the next layer, and the next, and the next, and the next. So we don't want to do this whole chunk at a time because that would be 2 layers. We want to just add 1 layer at a time. And that's how we're going to recognize the stripes. And one thing I want to point out here, because we matched this tiling to the orientation of the twists in the crease pattern, is that you see these stripes in the crease pattern? Those are vertical stripes. The stripes we're going to be folding are horizontal stripes. So we can't look at the crease pattern to say, oh, there's a stripe, and fold that, or we'll have all kinds of pleat overlaps. We want to look at the tiling and say, okay, these stripes are horizontal. I'm going to add just that layer of twists. So let me go ahead and do a, let's go to this view, and I'm going to go ahead and full screen the crease pattern now that we've seen how we're going to fold it. And we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, so we've got stripes in the crease pattern, which will be the stripes of our motif. We've got stripes in the tiling. Erlu has commented, so this is the same, but at 90 degrees. The 90 degrees part is going to be that the tiling has each edge 90 degrees relative to the direction that the pleat folds are headed. So that's what's going on there. And let me get out my grid. I'm working on a 32-fold triangle grid on a square. And now the question is, where do we start? And there's kind of two obvious places where we could start. One of those is in the, I'm going to bring back this view so I can see where my mouse is. I'm going to either start in the middle of two triangles or in the middle of two trapezoids. There's probably some other places you could start, but those are going to be some nice places. And for today's purposes, I'm going to start us with a triangle. So I'm going to find the center of my paper, and I can either eyeball it or say, okay, I need to fold in half along a edge parallel grid line, and then I can follow my pinch mark on the edge to identify the center. And so with that center identified, if I'm going to do the triangle twists as my center, I'm going to have and let's go ahead and do the one on top first. I'm going to have those 3 mountain folds intersecting one grid spacing above the center point of the paper where my mouse is. And I can go ahead and use the valleys in the crease pattern to say, okay, my valleys are going to be here. This is actually going to be a left-handed triangle twist. And I could have just as equivalently said I'm going to do the triangle below the center point and had a right-handed triangle, but it's really equivalent in these cases as long as we're paying attention to where our valley folds and mountain folds are. So once I've folded those mountain and valley folds, I can then squash that triangle. And I'll keep the crease pattern up for a little bit more. What I want to find, what I want to have stored in my paper is this triangle, the trapezoid that comes next, and then the triangle that comes after. And once I have that much, I can get rid of the crease pattern entirely because it's not giving me any extra information. So what's next is my trapezoid twist. And for that trapezoid twist, I'm going to have a valley going up from the corner of my triangle twist. And I'm going to have the next mountain 2 spaces away. So this is a trapezoid, the mountain's going to be 2 spaces away. It's the invisible mountain that's going between the tips of these 2 trapezoids. So whenever you have a twist that is outlined in mountain folds, you're going to have a mountain fold coming out of every corner, whether you see it or not. And this is what we'll see when we're folding one twist at a time. You'll always see the mountain fold when you're folding. You won't always see it in the finished piece. And with the trapezoid twist, the mountain of the double depth pleat continues straight out the other side as the mountain of the middle of the 3 single depth pleats. And then you see how we have this X here of mountain folds, 1 space out from the point of the X. I need it to act like an open hexagon star. So this mountain, instead of going this way up and to the right, needs to come down and to the right from that point, one space out from where my original two mountains ran into each other. And now I need to make sure that my double depth plate has its valley on the grid line. And I can go ahead and squash that twist. So the last thing I said I needed from the crease pattern is how far away the next triangle twist would be. And I can look here and see, okay, there's going to be 1, 2, 3 spaces between valley folds. So I've got one space that's under the folded pleat, and then 1, 2 more. So that will be my next valley fold, and my mountain will be one spacing away. Leading to my new triangle twist being in place right there. One thing I can do to double check, because I saw the mirror symmetry in the crease pattern, is I can double check that these two are in line with each other. So there's not an offset between their bottoms, which means that I can run a mirror symmetry line through there. And let's go all the way zoomed in and continue folding. So from here, we have our setup, and we want to continue the stripe on this stripe all the way out to both edges of the paper. And I'm going to continue in the same way that I did the first repeat. So I'm going to do my trapezoid next. The valley of the double depth pleat comes to the corner of the triangle. My mountain is 2 spaces away because this is the double depth pleat. I'm going to set up that double depth pleat, mostly emphasizing the mountain, so I can find the continuation of that mountain on the far side of my original pleat. And when I continue it on the far side, I'm placing the valley one spacing away on the opposite side as the valley is on this side. And then the continuation of the original pleat, I'll go one spacing out from the X and change directions. So I'm getting half of an open hexagon puffy star. And then I can squash that trapezoid. And coming to the edge here, I know I need to have 2 spaces past the folded mountain to reach the valley of my next twist. And that's going to be a closed triangle. So now going in the opposite direction, how do we find our reference for the next trapezoid? Well, we're going to go 2 spaces past the folded mountain and put in a valley fold, because it's 3 spaces between valleys in either direction. And when we put in the mountain one spacing further out, that is going to be the one that continues straight on up as the double depth pleat. And then we're going to come, so now we have, so just setting this up, we have this X up top, and I need that new mountain fold to be coming down here. So it's going to change orientation and it's also going to move, and we can get our new twist in place. Now we need to come one space out from the corner of the trapezoid to find our next triangle twist center, which we can set up in place. And then we'll repeat the process of putting in our new pleat. And the other thing I'm using as a reference now that I've been folding is one spacing gap between these folded mountains. And I'm going to extend that vertical mountain up. It will be my double depth pleat, and I'm going to bring my remaining pleat down and to the left for that last trapezoid. And then if I want to squash the partial triangle, I can do so. So that is 1/2 of the full repeating stripe. And now it's time to do another half. And when I'm looking at this, it's kind of arbitrary whether I fold on the top next or on the bottom. I'm going to choose to fold on the top because that double depth pleat is going to give me a little bit more, I guess, reference for my trapezoid. I'm going to end up doing both eventually anyways. So from that double depth pleat, I remember from the crease pattern that the tips of the triangle or the trapezoid twists are touching. And so I'm going to have a valley fold running out. This is going to be a mirror copy of what we already have. And with that, I can keep the mountain of the double depth pleat. And I need another mountain fold. And that is going to go up and to the left. I'm doing my best to keep these other pleats fully folded as I fold over them. And again, what we're looking for with this open trapezoid twist is 1/2 of an open hexagon. And we'll squash that. Now that that's in place, I can choose to do the partial triangle twist over here, kind of finishing out this end of things. And then I need my matching triangle up here. So what I'm going to do is set up that triangle. I'm going to find all the mountains, and then I'm going to lay it down as a three-way intersection while I fold my next trapezoid. Or at least while I set up my next trapezoid, because I don't really want to be sending this pleat all the way through. So I'm setting up that trapezoid. This is far enough out I can go ahead and set up my triangle again and squash them in either order. And then I'll repeat setting up the triangle, setting up that next trapezoid, and squashing in either order. So these patterns that you can fold in stripes are really great for practicing trapezoid or rhombus twists, because they do have a lot of quick repetition. And you'll see some of my other tutorials, like Alpine, the trapezoid twists video. Really, it's an expansion of the pattern I call Alpine. These have very similar properties and are also great for practicing the trapezoid twists. So once we have that next repeat folded, we can go ahead and do really either side, folding however long we want. We can leave nice edges, we can choose not to. I'm going to go ahead and fold the rest. And if y'all have questions for me, definitely drop them in the chat. I will be watching as I fold. So I'm going to do the top first and just finish off this top half. The bottom half will be pretty much exactly the same. And on this, now that we're connecting to the triangles, I don't have the directionality of all of those double depth plates like I had in the last line of twists to tell me which side to start from. So I'm going to arbitrarily decide to start on the left and go to the right. I have a little bit of a hunch that this will work out well, but we'll see. And this is the substance of my hunch. As this pleat is coming in for this triangle, I can go ahead and open up and set up that next triangle. So that my pleat is kind of bouncing back off and not going through existing twists. And then I can finish this trapezoid up above. And that little partial triangle in there. And then squash this triangle. And I'm just going to follow that pleat overlap all the way across. The vertical is going to be my double depth pleat. And I'm going to open this up to set up the next triangle down below, or to the right rather. And you can see as we get more repeats here, we get these zigzagging lines, which are pretty neat. And I'm going to check back with my file system real quick so I get the name of the pattern right. Once I finish this line of repeats. But this is a pattern that I've never folded before. I had sketched out and seen that it would have this nice zigzag pattern of twists. But I hadn't actually really verified it before right now. So this is to say, once you understand how to analyze the crease patterns, how to figure out which way to fold, which twist to add, you don't have to practice the patterns before you fold them. You can just go and say, okay, I see how this is working. I can set up the beginning and then use that to determine what happens later. And I'm going to rotate this to the top, mostly so it's in screen for the video, to do more repeats. But first I'm going to tell you the name of the pattern. This is, drumroll, Chevron Field. So Chevron Field is the name of the pattern we're working on. Okay, so Now we've got the same kind of setup in the opposite orientation, and because I rotated the paper, and I'm going to now work from right to left so that when I do each trapezoid, the pleat going down into the next triangle can be causing the triangle and floating back up. And for this first one, I'm actually going to start by finding my triangle. And then opening this up, even since I rotated, the double depth pleat is still going to be vertical. Because I did rotate a half turn. So things that were vertical before stay vertical now. And I do have a partial triangle there at the edge. So that's an interesting thing to see. When I started with the triangle corners in the edge on a 32-fold grid, I get exactly splitting the triangles on either side. And what that tells me is if I wanted to get repeats cleanly all the way across without partial twists, I could shift the center of the paper over so it's one spacing into the gap. So that's something that I can use if I want to do future iterations. And I might want to shift it 2 spacings so that this becomes the new edge, and I also get more paper out here. So that's a useful bit of information to know moving forward. So I'm going to find this half of an open hexagon. My double depth plate is vertical, and as this plate comes down, I'm going to make a 3-way intersection of mountains for my next triangle. And so you might be wondering, like, why did I start with the triangles in the center? Couldn't I have known in advance that I was going to be kind of splitting on the edges? And I could have known. Given the crease pattern, I could have known. But it wasn't the point of today's video, and I knew I would be marking up this piece, so I didn't really care if it was the most professional presentation of this particular pattern. So the things you do for practice pieces are going to help you get started faster, but they're not necessarily going to be exactly the same things you do for display pieces. In terms of the sequence of folding, yes. In terms of your starting point, not necessarily. So from here, I've got a whole bunch of double depth plates, and they're all stacked on top of each other in the same orientation. So I'm going to start at the top of the stairs. So I'm stepping up with each movement. This is the top. And I'm going to have my valley coming into the corner of the existing trapezoid. The mountain fold of the double depth pleat stays a mountain on the other side, and I'm putting a valley 1 spacing to the left because the double depth valley was 2 spaces to the right. And my pleat that's going through a lot of overlaps is headed away from my existing twists. And then if I want to, I can stick that little triangle there on the side. And now I need my triangle up top here. That will flow into my next trapezoid. So with this layer, I'm using the trapezoid to make the triangle pleat go further away. And squashing, squashing. And given what I know, I can just choose to crease the valley straight from the corner of this trapezoid to the corner of that trapezoid, because I know that's what I'm going to be using for my triangle and the next trapezoid. So you'll notice as I'm setting up these trapezoids, I'm finding this pleat very quickly. That's mostly due to having folded probably a couple hundred of them. And so I'm able to recognize where that pleat should be by pattern matching onto what are the projections of my mountain folds here, where does this next one need to be. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying this single depth pleat is coming in here, this one's coming in here, the next one needs to hit one spacing up. So as I open that up, I'm making it hit one spacing up. And then I settle everything into place. That's really the distinction between the closed trapezoid and the open trapezoid. With the open trapezoid, we're making it hit one spacing further up. With the closed trapezoid, it hits at the same point. And so having folded many of both of those, it's something that I recognize quickly. So now for our final repeat across the top, I'm going to start with the triangle here. Well, really, I'm going to, because I don't really have a strong triangle here, I just have that pleat and it's going to be a partial triangle. I know I'm going to end up folding this triangle here, so I can go ahead and get that started. And then the vertical is going to carry through and be my double depth pleat heading up and out. And I can get that all squashed in place. And squash that tiny wee triangle there. And then continue across. In the same way. So when we started on this piece, we looked at the crease pattern and we analyzed what twists are present. There was a trapezoid facing one way and a trapezoid facing another way. Also, triangles facing two different ways. How are these twists connected? The long pleat, or the double depth pleats of the trapezoids connected directly to each other. Then there were pleats going out from the trapezoids that connected to the two different triangles, and the pleat opposite the double depth pleat of the trapezoids also connected to the opposite trapezoid in the next repeat over. And from that, we were able to say, okay, here is how the pattern is connected. We were able to draw the tiling of the pattern, and we were able to find lines that went straight through the tiling that we knew would be nice places to stop because all of the pleats would be parallel across that line. And that is how we decided to fold one stripe at a time, and we ended up with this lovely squiggly chevron of Chevron Field. And if I orient it the same way as we saw originally in the crease pattern, it would be this orientation, because we did this chunk first and it was above the center. And yeah, so that's how the crease pattern was drawn. It's not necessarily how I would display the pattern. And let's take a look actually at the backlighting. So this is something that I've never seen before. I've never seen how this pattern is backlit. And now we're all going to see it at the same time. So we get those chevrons, and we also see these lines connecting them, almost like little boats. So that's a fun thing to see when you're folding a pattern. And it's actually, for me, honestly, this is the grand reveal of this is what the work was for, seeing that backlit image, especially in a pattern that no one has ever folded before. Yeah, so Nancy, it is the same folding style as Pearl, which is a pattern with triangles and rhombuses that's also mirrored across these skinny lines of twists. Pearl also has that wavy repeats. But what it does is it does rhombuses in here and then triangles here, and then there's also some rhombuses in between. So there's all kinds of patterns that can be folded this way, and very few of them have been explored. It's not something that I tend to focus on because I really like the hexagonal symmetry patterns, but these are really great for practicing twists. And if you want to generate your own, like if you have my crease pattern templates and you want to make some, I would recommend choosing a tiling first. So choosing like what's the structure, how's it going to repeat, and then going and saying, okay, I want to fill this tile with, in this case, an open trapezoid. I want to fill that tile with a closed triangle. And then what was required, because those were the only two choices that I made to make this pattern, after I had decided to use that particular tiling and use mirror symmetry, was choosing, okay, open trapezoid, closed triangle, same side of the paper, close together. And everything else came from those choices. So that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be teaching in the Tessellation Academy theory and design workshops, where we're able to see, okay, we have some structure. We've practiced some examples in that structure. Now, what are some other options? What are some other choices that could be made? In this case, I could have chosen to maybe, since I do have these like right-handed trapezoids and left-handed trapezoids, I could have chosen to have those on opposite sides, have this stripe be on the opposite side from this stripe, and then either mirror or continue alternating. There's a bunch of options with this particular choice of twists. But they're all going to get folded the same way. You're going to have a stripe, and then maybe you flip the paper over, maybe you don't. You have another stripe, and you're able to continue on and really get a lot of variation from a simple set of choices. So if you want to learn more about Tessellation Academy, now's a great time. I did decide to lower the price down to $22 a month or $195 a year, which is closer to 15 a month, if I'm doing my mental math correctly. And so that's now more affordable, where it doesn't have to be like the only craft you're doing. So that's what's going on. We're having our first theory and design workshop tomorrow on alternating square twists. And I'm really excited to see what everyone comes up with after getting into the meat of the choices. So happy folding, everyone. I hope you'll join me for Tessellation Academy, or, keep watching the live streams. That's also awesome. Next week, I'm going to be talking about folding in rings around the center, but not folding whole twists all at once. So this is going to be a technique that I call pseudo tiling breaks. So in this tiling that we looked at today, there were lines that go all the way through. With the patterns I'll talk about next week, there are not. And so we'll be exploring ways to deal with that without stopping at places where there's a ton of pleat overlaps. So happy folding. I'll see you next week. And yeah, have fun with origami.